that he had. He is on his way. But for the purposes of the meeting, because we have a long agenda, we'll just go ahead and at least get started with a call to order. And what I would do is, so we'll call the meeting to order at this point in time. And I would ask of the social service organizations that are here present if they could introduce themselves. Please.
Spitzer, I'm with East Peak Senior Center.
Jocelyn Elias, J-POC Area Agency on Aging.
Mary Thomas, Vertically Challenged, Community Resources Council.
Debbie Gilbo, Positive Connections.
Carla Gatequest, Health Access.
Michelle Moe, Prevention and Recovery Services, Safe
Heidi Pickrell with Meals on Wheels.
Olivia Lozano.
John Holmes, Community Action.
All right, thank you very much. The first order in the meeting is to select a chairperson for the meeting. Would you like for us to go ahead and do this now, or would you like for us to go ahead and continue the process of the meeting till we have Councilmember Jensen and just do it then?
I move to nominate you for chair.
I accept. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We continue with the meeting. The next order in the agenda is to approve the minutes of March 29, 2016. I know that we received these. However, I will allow for a few minutes for anybody to review them in case there's any questions or comment.
I move to approve the minutes.
Move to approve. Motion has been made. I second. Are there any public comments with regards to the meeting minutes? Seeing none, all in favor vote aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, at this point in time, we will pass this on to Ms. Corey Wright to give us an overview of the review of the applications and the scoring process.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. You received the scorings for all the applications from the review committee. The review committee consisted of 4 people: Rochelle Vega-Ratana,
Vanessa Lermo, Kendra Tinsley, Tiffany Noller.
Yes. So we had 3 expert reviewers and then 1 staff that participated that on the new system, the EC Impact. So everything went pretty smoothly on that.
Thank you very much. Just for the benefit of those watching at home and for the new members of the council that are participating in this, I wanted to give a brief overview on how the process was developed. In years past, we had a measuring and tracking system, and after we would go ahead and review those grants, there was no standardized process in which to grade the way that the grants were going to be awarded funds. And the process was one in which the organizations then had an opportunity to participate in the city council meeting, and it would be, the organizations would sit there till like sometimes midnight, and there's stories of 1 o'clock in the morning. I remember when I used to work in a nonprofit that it was a long, drug-out process. So with that in mind, it was the desire to optimize the process. This committee was developed, and the whole role of this committee is to then work with those nonprofit organizations, establish clear expectations of what would be measured in order for the organizations to receive a score. And that was done in year 1 of the committee. In that first year, we worked with the organizations and with this committee to establish what the weighting system was going to be. This committee then, after the committee voted and allowed for public comment, we established what the scoring process was going to be. And then after that was done, we proceeded with establishing then how we were going to split the monies allotted. There was a certain amount of money that was going to go into social services, and there was a certain amount of money that was going to go into emergency aid. Then once those percentages are established, that then supports the staff as they work with a panel of professionals, of experts, who help them take a look at the grants. Furthermore, the last 2 years, I know that there has been an amount of support provided to the organizations by the panel of professionals being able to work with the organizations to make sure that they're able to work on their grant, they're able to work on the outcome process, so that everybody is clear and on the same page. That was one of the things that the last year that I was part of this committee that we worked on, ensuring that everybody had a chance to work not only with the city, but with a panel of experts that would help them out in the grants. And then here we are today with, I think, round 3 or 4
This was 3.
of this new process. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have a couple questions. What made this panel experts?
The committee, the ECD committee last year selected, and in particular, Councilmember Hiller selected a few people in the community that were known to be knowledgeable in outcomes and outputs, and so we deemed them as the experts. We offered their services to all the agencies for assistance in creating outputs and outcomes and to help them with their applications for this year.
And, I lost my thought. Most of them had a medical background, is that correct? Why was there not some
Yep. These are the ones
non-medical?
Yeah, these were the ones specifically picked out by the chair from the ECD committee last year. Yes.
If I may interject, if there is such a desire to work this year on establishing a new panel, we would be more than happy to work with the staff and with recommendations from the committee so that we could go ahead and work on a new group, if that's a desire.
Okay. Let me see what the question was. Nope, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, at this point in time, Corey, if you would
Okay.
lead us through the process.
Okay. So all the applications were scored by all 4 of the panel members. They then got together in one meeting. If there was a discrepancy between a scoring on one particular category, then they kind of talked about that and picked their final score as a team. So all the scores that you see before you are final from all 4 members. So if you have any questions about any of the scores, we'd be happy to, if it was sent to you in electronic format, so you should have been able to hover over those comments. All of them had comments. If there was a less than perfect score, we put comments on why they were scored at a lower rate. But if there's any questions, we go over those. Yes?
Council Lady.
Okay, so I noticed have you always had outcomes and outputs?
Yes.
Okay, I noticed there were almost half of them scored 8s on both of those. So my concern is, this is the first year also for the online, right?
For online, yes.
My concern is, that kind of tells me either they didn't understand what it was, or perhaps there wasn't enough room with the online. Did they all use up their space on the online?
They had maximum space, so there was no boundary on the spacing.
So you could keep on going?
Mm-hmm.
So is it normal for there to be half of the people not to score, to have all 8s?
If
8
I
out
can
of 10.
interject,
Pardon, sure.
outcomes and outputs have been a struggle with nonprofits in our community for a long, long time, and there's tons and tons of training that's available. It's a necessary evil when you're trying to measure success with some of these programs. And even from my days at the United Way, we struggle with agencies and whether or not an output was an outcome or several outputs became the outcome. A lot of it is you just have to go to the training classes and they help work you through what you have and what it needs to go. But it's been a struggle with nonprofits in this community for quite some
Well,
time.
I've worked in nonprofits 40 years. I've written my share of grants, but I still want to know, you still have the question,
Sure.
is this new? Are there 8s new
No.
that
And
this many have?
actually,
8s
these scores are higher than last year's.
than normal?
Yeah,
With the,
this is an improvement. So each
Okay.
year that we've been in this process, they have gotten better and better
okay,
with
that was
those
my
2
question.
categories. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions about the scoring itself? Okay. All right, so the funding option that we proposed, we wanted to start with using the funding recommendation based on the 2015 allocation. The reason for that is when we use the percentage base, say they got an 80% on their score, 80% of what they requested is kind of how we started this process. So what happened the very next year is everyone requested considerably more, thinking that we were going to use that same philosophy. So we would like to continue to use that 2015 because that was kind of our baseline for doing this. And then we would times that by the percent they received on their application. And then if they scored an 80 to 100, they would get a 2% increase on top of that. So a little increase if they scored high. And if they scored 79 to 60, they would receive a 1% increase, 0% increase for 60 to 50, and then no funding for scores below 50. And that was our formula on how we did that, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Are they told the amount of money that's available?
The ECD committee last year did amount contracted services 312,000, social services 488 for a total of 800,000 that they could apply for
So
with no cap. So they could apply for whatever they wanted. That was what the ECD committee selected.
But it really doesn't matter, because if you're only giving a percent over what they were awarded, it really doesn't matter what they asked for. So why do they have to put an amount they asked for? If it's going to be set
Well,
up.
This is our recommended way to go. You have the right to go any way you want. And you could use what they've asked for, but we would not have nearly enough money to fund all of the agencies or, even close, so, yeah.
Just for history purposes, at the time that we established the process that we have today, one of the biggest challenges that we were having was that we had lost a significant amount of money in our general fund, and we had dropped back the amount of funding that was being provided to the organizations. We wanted to ensure, and that's why the heavy weighting on the outcome and output measurement is so important, because we wanted to make sure that if and the justification, I think, that rather than lying solely on the fact that we did not want to fund organizations at a higher level, if you are saying in a grant that you are going to produce X number of outputs and outcomes, and you are unable to produce that with the amount of money that you received, then it would not make any sense for you to request additional funding, because you're already receiving a certain amount that you've designated, stating in the year prior that this is the amount of money needed in order for you to generate the results that you're telling us that you're going to with that grant funding. And that is why it was so important for us to make sure that we were using that measurement. So the challenge was that at the point in time that we did not put a baseline for the grantors to request funding, when they did not receive the required funds, even though the outcomes did not meet the expectations 100%, there were no 10s, then what you end up having is there's a request for higher funds without the justification of the outcomes to support it.
Or they adapt. I mean, okay, so you ask for 40,000, you get 27, and you adapt your outcomes to match.
Correct.
You see what I'm saying?
So, I mean,
As budget.
So the challenge is that with the organizations that are here, there was a priority basis established on what services the city was going to be funding. And we wanted to make sure that those organizations that really met that were able to apply, also allowing new organizations to come in. If we go ahead and we start giving additional funding to organizations that have not met those outcome measurements, and we have new organizations coming in, our funding pool is limited. So it's nice to have a baseline of the amount of money that was received year prior, and not only that, but measuring it against the outcomes that the organizations were able to provide, because it's almost like a written contract.
So that goes into the scoring?
Yes,
I
that
mean,
is
I
actually
thought-
the highest weighted points
Where's that at?
system.
I mean, on here.
It's the outcomes clear and outputs are clear, that's 20 points, and then
But not the fact that they made it.
prior grants is the other
The scoring
column,
indicates
and
if they
that's
made it or
20
not.
points.
The past grant,
Outcomes prior grants, it says, it's 20 points.
prior grant.
Mm-hmm.
And the total points that they could get is at the top.
So okay, so it looks like everybody did that. So if they did that, that wouldn't be an issue.
Correct.
Okay. Lost where we were. Okay, go ahead.
All right. So with that in mind, I wanted to just talk a little bit about what last year, what we budgeted, the ECD committee did decide on. We budgeted 148,268. You can see this on this sheet right here that I handed you. 148,268 for CDBG, 339,732 for general fund for the prevention and counseling, and then 312,000 for contracted services through the general fund, totaling the 800,000. Our department with the CDBG funds has consistently gotten cut from year to year to year, and we need to drop that amount just a little bit this year and probably a little bit again for next year to accommodate for every year getting cut about 2 to 4%. So we did drop that amount just slightly for CDBG to 133, 149 there. General fund stays the same on both parts. So our recommendation would total 784,881 and not the 800,000. Say. Another little caveat is that the ECD committee did put 312,000 in contracted services. With the scenarios that we have before you today, we only have 229,363 in contracted services. So with this recommendation, we would be carrying that difference of that money down into prevention and counseling services so we could then fund those agencies that met the criteria. So it's just a little shift of funding. And we do have the 102,455 for the social service emergency aid is 20%, so that did fall in plus or the 25% plus or minus 5. We did fall in okay with that. That was set by the ECD committee.
Questions? Okay, continue.
Okay, that's about that.
Oh, I have questions now.
Okay.
Is now the time to ask? There we
Yes,
go.
ma'am.
Okay. A question, can you have, I noticed like, there's some agencies that are on the contracted and there's some that's on the social services. Can you do both then?
Yes. Contracted services are services that the city feels that are essential to city services. So without these services that they provide, we would have to do them, in fact, ourselves through the city. And then social services not. We have a mixture, don't we? Safe Streets.
So I guess it seems like double dipping to me.
Well, most of these are independent programs, not necessarily the agency. So if your agency does Program A and Program B, Program A may be a contracted service where Program B is different.
Applies in both.
Well, let's see.
Okay.
If they
So
are.
yeah, the only one that is in both categories is the Y, and one is for Center for Safety and Empowerment, which is
Jayhawk also.
Jayhawk,
and, oh,
yeah.
and Jayhawk. My apologies. Yeah.
And wasn't there a KCSL, but it's
Yeah.
a supporting?
Yeah, KCSL. Shawnee County has
Okay.
2.
Yeah. I apologize. I didn't catch.
So you can do both,
You can. Mhm.
but the
They are different programs, though.
the
Different.
contracted is different.
Right.
Yes.
You couldn't apply for both in the
Applications.
same program.
The applications in each pot are for different programs. So contracted services, as an example, for KCSL, Shawnee County is for juvenile intake and assessment. That's what they've applied for, that program in contracted services, whereas in social services, they've applied for supporting school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, school success, I guess is the name of the program. So 2 different programs, same agency, but different scope, maybe?
Do we have an example of a perfect grant that agencies are given to look at?
Oh gosh, we have offered outcomes outputs training. We've offered experts to help. We give them the score sheet I feel like the staff is available at any point in time. I feel like we give lots of opportunities for them to come to us and help with any parts.
For
of
the
that.
benefit of Councilmember Clear, would you mind walking us through the scoring sheet?
Sure, if I have it. 1 second.
And I guess, are the scores given a perfect grant? What are they comparing to? Or is it subjective on what they think clear outcomes is?
Well,
Each question has a specific denominator that
Yeah, I
indicates
saw
how much
that.
points it would have.
But as a teacher, I have my perfect one, and this is how I know where these fall in that matrix because I compare it to the perfect one.
In that case, it's very subjective. I mean, there is no right or wrong answer.
So these are subjective.
somewhat. I mean, you have to be somewhat subjective when you're looking at social service grant applications. I mean, there's no way to, I mean, whether or not their board consists of a certain representation,
Right.
that's not subjective.
Right.
But whether outcomes are clear or not, it is subjective, which is why we kind of pulled in those experts this year, or who we deemed were experts, and had 4 people at the table kind of making that decision as opposed to 1 or 2 just staff members. So we wanted to take out some of that subjectivity, so it was less. And I feel like we're doing a pretty good, each year we're getting a little bit better at being able to, and they're getting way better at doing the outcomes and outputs and.
Are they given
everything.
feedback on what they did not do well on?
We always allow them feedback, so once today's meeting is over, if they want their score, we provide that to them by email, of course. And if they have a question, we will certainly answer that as
Okay.
well.
Do we have copies of that for them?
So at this point, Corey, if I understand correctly, the request of this committee is to either approve or deny the recommendation of staff for funding?
Yes.
Do the council members have any questions with regards to this?
One more.
Absolutely.
Okay, when you said that if they were new and you weighted their response, I talked to other cities about how they do their scoring on grants, because I was interested on how we do ours and how other cities do theirs. And one of the responses were, what they really focused on was the longevity of a social service. Because if they've been using the money and get the grants for a long period of time, they're good stewards of that money. Where you're kind of gambling on new agencies. So I would think that an agency that's been around for 20, 30, 50, 100 years would get some kind of rating or an extra point or something. And I was wondering why we don't do that.
We had ample discussion, I think it was year 1, when we started implementing the system with regards to providing the longevity points for an organization that had been pre-existent. And I think that the determination of the body was that rather than giving points for longevity, again, the focus was geared towards the measurement of the outcomes of an organization, so that they would be able to, whether the organization was new or the organization was an organization that had been existing for several years, that they were able to show that they were being good stewards of those funds. Some of the organizations have been able to provide spectacular outcomes back to the city, but one of the things that we had noticed, and the reason that we even wanted to open it up to new grantees, was the fact that there were organizations that had been receiving city funds that had not been meeting those outcome measurements that they had stated that they were going to be able to meet. And there was a lot of discussion as well as of wanting to have new organizations feel like they could apply, because there may be some amazing programs that would fit right in hand with the priorities of the city. So we did not want to hinder that, because I think that for years, no new organizations were able to apply. And I think that from that change, there's 1 or 2 new organizations that were able to make the funding streams that have been extremely supportive to the goals of the city going forward.
And I agree. However, I can write a good outcome and I can write a good output. That doesn't mean I'm going to be a good steward of that money. I just think if you have proven that you are, you ought to get, I don't know, a little more weight. And most of the cities do it that way, and so I just couldn't see a good reason why we didn't. I mean, I understand what you're saying. By all means, I do think people ought to be able to apply, But I think the ones that do a good job year after year after year after year should get a little more, better treatment, I guess, than those that are new. And I have one more question that popped in my head. On your contracted agencies, those are the ones the city absolutely has to have or we cannot function. I mean, right? Okay, nothing personal, but how can we not function with Keep America Beautiful and Safe Streets? How will the city go bleh if we didn't
Cleaning
have those?
storm drains is very expensive for us to do, and they handle that for us.
So we don't clean storm drains, Sasha?
They handle a lot of that.
They clean all our storm drains?
I can't speak for the stormwater department. I don't know the answer to that question. I can tell you that last year I did make a recommendation to the committee that those two be moved down into the preventative and contracted services, and the decision was made to leave them in contracted services.
Well, I'd like to know how much money that's saving us, the Keep America Beautiful. If they are cleaning our storm drains, then we need to be saving a lot of money city-wise.
Have you met with the gal that's in charge of that?
Huh?
Okay.
And-
That's where I
and-
got my information from.
I would say that they not only work with the storm drainage, but they also work with beautification, cleaning up of parks. They work with different organizations to do a lot of work that helps keep our city looking the best that it can be.
But I just don't see where that ranks up here with, you have to have them or our city's going to be,
And maybe have to have them would not be the term that I would use. I think that the way that we worded it in the past was that these would be services that the city would provide, and we are pretty much outsourcing them. So they're almost a supplement, because when you take a look at the amount that they're getting funded of $13,000, and you compare that to even having just one staff person do the amount of work that they do in the community, just based on multiplying 2,080 hours a year, which is what one employee would work, without counting the coordination and the amount of man-hours that are put into the work that they do. When you look at how much, if you count the amount of hours that you count for volunteer, which is $22 an hour, that's what the government says that a volunteer is, it's several hundred thousands of dollars that
So-
is saving the city.
so we are getting all our drainage for $13,000 cleaned. That's
That's
amazing.
only one function of what they do, but
That's
that's
amazing.
part of it. Yeah, I mean, it saves a significant amount of money to have them coordinate.
And don't,
with each other.
please, don't put in the paper anything, she's against Keep America Beautiful and Safe Streets. No, I'm just trying to understand.
Well, and that's healthy, though. I mean, as part of with contracted services, we had this discussion at length last year. You know, if this is a function that the city generally provides in society and we're outsourcing it, we need to know what we're getting for our dollar, and we need to be able to go back to our constituents and ensure that it's at a good rate. So you're absolutely right to question it. I agree completely. But that's generally the premise, was they come in and offset the costs that generally staff would have to handle, and cleaning storm drains is one aspect of it, but picking up trash in a park and coordinating all that stuff is another. So they're very multifaceted in what all these organizations do for us.
But Sarah, social services, you could say that about most of any of these. We could contract services for all these also. I mean, if you want to make it work. I could put these, plug them in up here under contracted services.
And that's true. A good statistician can make a number say anything he
Exactly.
wants. So this is just the way it has fallen, at least for the past several years.
And Councilmember Clear, just for clarification, a lot of the services that you see here are very closely tied to staff actions. Like, for example, Center for Safety and Empowerment is public safety. You have Safe Street is public safety, again, supporting our police officers to ensure that our neighborhoods are safe. Housing and credit counseling, they do tenant landlord counseling, which again is a service that is not provided anywhere in the city. There is no support, and we used to have a department here that did this, and the HRC, and it's no longer existent. So they pretty much have taken over that function that the city used to provide. So when you take a look at all of these programs, these are the programs that the city somehow, some way would have been providing. What is a separating marker of the other ones is that these are programs that it's not that the city does not believe in them. The city has a priority with regards to how they would like to see, how we would like to see our city be supported. And then those are the things that are on the bottom, because those are directly social services, not so much actions that the city itself would be providing.
No, but I would pick youth over beauty. I mean, if I had to pick, if we're going to be really concerned about something, it'd be the youth here, or the aging and the mental over beauty. I mean, that's beside the point. So Safe Streets helps TPD. Why isn't it under TPD? If they help TPD.
If I could answer that, yeah. Last year, they were trying to streamline all the grant process and make it all into one category, so they actually came over last year. Was it last year? Last year, brought over to the pot, and then the 60,000 is from the general fund from there.
So they were at TPD, getting funded by TPD. Now the city funds them, but they're helping TPD.
I think they were still
It
general
still comes
fund.
out of the general
Yeah.
fund from the
They were general fund
police
over there, they're now
department.
general fund over here.
So TPD got a minus 60,000 when they came over here.
To my understanding, yes, but we might have to ask the budget.
Who's the
person.
budget piece people?
Ted.
I'm sorry.
Not listening to my rambling. When Safe Streets came over to the city, did the 60,000 that was at TPD to fund them come back to us?
I would have to check with TPD. I can get back to you on that.
And if memory serves me right, this is going to be year 2. I think that the answer is no. I think that TPD is passing that part of the $60,000 is still in their budget. But what they wanted was for this group, because we evaluate all of these other things, the contracted services, that allocation is a pass-through to this committee, but it's still coming out of their budget. And we could verify that. We'll make note to make sure that budget sends us that information. But my understanding was that TPD will still do a pass-through. It will still show up in TPD's budget. They just wanted for the organization to go through the same process, because that way it was standardized.
Right. Okay.
Great question.
Oh, that's it. I'll go through my notes and find another one.
Okay. So at this point in time, I will ask council members committee members to take a look at the allocation for the contracted services. And if they have any questions with regards to any particular organization that they see here, and if they don't have any questions, I would welcome a motion for either approval.
If we approve them, what happens when I find out the answer to that question?
Which question?
Like at the 60,000, if we approve this, is that like something we can work on in the back door, or will that have an effect on? No, I don't think that have an effect, would it?
It would not. I mean, we would be approving the
Right,
total
right.
amount
Okay,
that
got
the
it.
staff is recommending.
Got it.
If there was a change that the committee wanted to discuss as a result of the answers to that question, it would affect next year's process.
Okay. Not this year's. Okay. Do you need a motion?
I do.
Okay, I move to approve.
And I will throw in a caveat. My company works with nonprofit organizations. Most of this, I don't have any control over whether this funding goes to pay my company or not, because it goes to the organization and they make their own independent discussion or decision there. But just so everybody knows, the lawyers tell me it's not a conflict of interest, but I'm not a lawyer. So.
Ooh, I have to throw out that I am a member of the Community Action Board through the mayor's appointment, and my daughter works at Boys and Girls Club, but I spoke to the attorneys, not a conflict, because neither one of us benefit
Yeah,
directly.
because we have, at an organization level, we don't have control over how this money is spent on or off our behalf. But just so everybody knows, when you volunteer in the organization and you're an involved person, oftentimes there is the appearance of impropriety. Like I've said, the lawyers have told us we are good to go.
Good to go.
It's great to work with people who have a great, strong moral compass and are able to go ahead and declare that. So at this point in time, we have a motion and I think a second.
Who seconded?
Jensen.
Okay, sorry.
Are there any public comments at this point in time with regards to the allocations for social services, for contracted services for the city? Seeing none, All those in favor of approving the allocations as presented here today, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now we move on to the social service application and emergency aid. Allow a few minutes for us to just review this again. That way, if there's any questions with any specific line item.
Can I make sure I'm reading this right? Okay, so they have an allocation. Oh, that was 15, okay, so I don't know what they asked for in 15. Is that right, Sasha? Or
Say again?
16. I really don't know what they asked for in 15 or 16.
No,
We
you're-
just know what
yeah.
they asked for in
Correct.
17.
You were given the total amount that was funded, or given to them in funding in 15 and 16, and then the total amount that they requested for this year.
That is a big drop. Is that right? That's why, am I reading this right?
Are you looking at the 2017 request?
2016
And
allocation is what they
recommendation.
received.
So in 15, they got 15,000, 16, they got 49, or that's what they asked for?
No, that's what they got.
That's what they got. And the reason for that is because we had one emergency aid provider that did not get funded at all, and we had to get our percentage of emergency aid folks up there. They did request that much, and we did give that much that year because we needed to.
See, that
have
is so
emergency aid
hard for
providers.
social services to go up and down like that.
That was also the very first year that we had the inflation of request
Mm-hmm.
based
bet.
off of our,
Correct.
based off of our percentage formula.
And just for just refreshing everybody with regards to the conversations that we had with these grants, one of the biggest concerns that we had was the city did not want to be the one organization that would make or break anybody's budget specifically because of that reason. We understand that we depend on a source of revenue that is inconsistent, to say the least, because we depend on property taxes, we depend on sales tax, and on all the things that feed the general fund. And there's going to be years that we're going to have a great year and have some extra dollars to give, and we have stayed true to that. The first year that we had these meetings, we had a significant drop in funding, so we had to drop our amounts and provide a number. And like this year, some organizations were cut, some organizations did not receive more, but then the second year after that, we had a little bit more money and we were able to go ahead and provide funding. In addition to that, one of the things that we have been very proud of is the fact that if we do have an organization that does not meet criteria and does not meet scoring, we're able to reallocate that into other organizations that have made a request that we have not been able to fund 100%. But it is understood that with the nature of the funding of the city, there's going to be times in which we're going to have some funds to provide, and there's going to be times that our pool is going to shrink.
And I think that's why you get the requests for
Absolutely.
100,000 or 10,000, because they don't know either. They don't know what your funding pool is going to be.
Mhm.
Okay.
Great discussion.
So are we on there? Move to approve?
Okay, so we are in the emergency aid area. Do I have a motion to approve the recommendations of funding for each organization at the amount of $102,455 total for all these organizations?
So moved.
I have a motion? I have a second. Do we have any public comment from the organizations that fall in this category? Seeing none? All those in favor vote yes.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Finally, we have the organizations that are just the social services. The total funded for those organizations is $453,000, $453,063.
I have a question for the scorers. Did they really look into duplication of services?
Yes.
did they ask, oh, there was one I read. Where I thought, I just want to make sure they at the end, outcomes and outputs.
There was 5 points allocated for duplication.
I know, but did they really, if they're in the medical field, I just wonder, like, one was for schools, and I was thinking, teachers do that, why do we need to do that? Did they ask those kind of questions?
We used only the application as the base for the scoring, so we didn't ask the agencies any questions on their application. We strictly based everything off of the application.
Should we? I mean, we're funding this, and yet, we may not need to be funding this.
How would we do that, though,
Ask them?
realistically?
Well, if you're going to give them money, and I'm thinking, wow, we do that in the school system, why do we need that out in the public? Someone needs to.
But if we ask them, wouldn't they give us the same answers in their application? If we
Well,
ask
not
them?
necessarily. Because your application doesn't ask that. Your application asks, how are you going to do it? It doesn't ask, this is duplicated here.
It does ask that
It
question.
does.
Is it duplicated?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. There's actually 5. If you look at your sheet that was passed,
Well, I hate to look at which one, I just wanted to know how far the scores went. Because there's some in here, and I looked and I went, wow, I wonder why we're giving money to that when it's done.
There were some, the scoring went on duplication.
I have it here. Services are not duplicated or duplication is justified is 5
Right.
points. Duplication is explained but not satisfactorily justified, that's 3 points. And duplication is not explained. So if an organization was already providing services, and for example, we needed 2 organizations to provide the service because the need was so significant that one organization could not take care of all of it, then there would be no consequence and you would get the total 5 points.
Which category was this? Duplication 5?
Duplication, mm-hmm.
What she was reading is on this sheet that I gave you, the score sheet.
Yeah, I was just seeing how many people didn't need it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, no, I'm on the wrong little column. So it's just 1. And I guess I wanted to know if the scores were knowledgeable enough to know if that was accurate, or do they care? Or
I think with a lot of these agencies, there is
They work.
duplication. But I think if they can justify it and base their outcomes off of the need, it all kind of interrelates together. That was what was considered by the review committee.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions? No? Seeing no questions at this point in time, I would entertain a motion for approval of the social service portion that totals $453,063. Mr. Jensen makes that motion.
second.
Councilwoman Clear seconds. Are there any comments from the organizations who are here present with regards to the allocations? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We have successfully allocated 2017 as a budget. At this point in time, are there any other items that the committee would like to bring forth for us for discussion?
Is this when we set up for next year? When do you
No.
do that?
I was just thinking, maybe it would be a good idea to walk through the committee's work for the rest of the year, and I think we can give them,
Please.
yeah, look, Corey's got a schedule.
I have the calendar.
Could you pass that for the
I
committee
sure
and read it out loud so that the
Well, you're
organizations,
You want her to pass it or read it?
could she read it and
Can't
then
do
pass
both
it?
at once?
I am.
I thought we had enough
With my left
copies for
hand?
I'll give you
everybody.
copies.
All right. Well, that's fine. Okay, so we are at, we're ready to make recommendation to City Council for June 7th. In July, the ECD committee affirms or adjusts recommendations based on the adopted budget, if that happens, and then the budget is approved in August. So we come back together, the ECD, in November and December. We start the process again, and we go through the picking priorities, all the stuff you were talking about today, Councilwoman Claire. Priorities happen in February. The request for proposal goes out February 8th. They have a month to get that back. And I can send you this electronically as well. And,
Please.
And at the next meeting, when we meet in November, December, we set this calendar and set it for the year. And each year we do that.
Is it possible for us to post it somewhere on the website so that the organizations also know
Absolutely.
what's the train that we're going to follow? In addition to that, today we approved the allocations for 2017. We also have, I lost the word, an appeal process. So once all the organizations receive their allocation, if there is an appeal, there is a protocol to be followed. So are there any other questions or comments from the public? Could you please approach the podium? Could you please introduce yourself, state the organization that you're working for? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Tracy Jepson. I'm with CASA of Shawnee County. When we had this meeting last year, we were given copies of the allocations so we could ask questions. When will we receive that copy?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
The scores and the funding announcements, now that they've been approved, will be sent out tomorrow, and agencies will have a week to appeal. If we have an appeal, we'll have another meeting and come before the committee again.
When do they receive their grant money?
In 2017,
I mean, like when?
first of the year.
First of the year?
Yeah.
So January?
Well, not the CDBG funds, so they don't.
CDBG, there is a delay because we don't get our funding announcement until a little later. But the general fund folks, as long as they've spent their 2016 funds, they would be able to start using their 2017 right away in January.
And so they'll get notice tomorrow that they were approved for how much money and?
Yes.
Okay.
And then like Corey was stating, if there is an organization that would like to appeal that amount, then we would be called back into committee and we would work with them.
And then July, what do we do?
Shoot off fireworks, cook hot dogs.
July was just the city adopting the city budget, so that's just on the calendar as us getting this ready for the
So at that
city's
point in
budget.
time, we as a
So-
committee would present to we would present before to the council of the body as a whole, our recommendation, and then in July, we go ahead and we make that final recommendation so that it's added to the budget as a final amount.
And then November, December, we start over with what we're going to do for
Yes.
next year?
Mhm.
Okay, got it.
Exactly.
So we have ample time to do planning.
Yes, we do.
Indeed.
Okay. All right.
Okay, seeing that there is no other items, no more public comment, at this point in time, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you all for being here.